Hey everyone, I'm Chris Luzniak,
And I'm Rob Byer, and this is
the Debate Math Podcast.
Debating Mathy topics and Mathy pedagogy with mathy people just like you.
Let's get into this month's debate. Math class is so often associated with pencil and paperwork, students working through steps of symbolic manipulation.
But have you ever wondered what role does or should technology have in math class? Our world is constantly changing, and how do we adapt to that in the math class?
From calculators to apps to now ChatGPT, the resources available keep growing. So how or what should we allow? How can we help students use technology wisely?
So today, we are not debating the inclusion of technology, but we are discussing how best to utilize it. We are asking, what is the most important thing to keep in mind about technology in math class?
And here to discuss this question, we have three mathematicians and educators who have so much to share with you. First up is someone who has taught students, teachers, and student teachers in various roles and settings for 30 years, who is passionate about using all types of technology effectively to enhance student understanding and has been using math ed tech since calculators used reverse Polish notation, or is that Polish notation?
Polish notation.
Polish notation. And someone who wants you to know that she is taller on the internet than she is in real life. It's Karen Camp. Hi, Karen.
Hi, Chris. Hi, Rob. So glad to be here.
Glad to have you here. Can you tell our listeners where you are and what your current role is?
I'm here in Connecticut. I'm an independent math education coach and consultant specializing in technology implementation and curriculum design. I present professional development at workshops, webinars, and conferences, both here in New England and throughout the United States.
Wonderful. And now the question we want to ask all of our guests is, when did math first become controversial to you? Karen?
So I was the kind of student, and many of us math teachers can agree with this. I was the kind of student who did well in math because I got right answers quickly, which was most of what math class valued at the time that I was coming through school. I remember triumphing over two classmates, both boys, doing long division contests in third grade. But when I started teaching, I realized that there was so much more to math than speed, doing it in your head, and the single-minded pursuit of the correct answer. I'm now much more interested in the journey of mathematical thinking and building understanding, and I work hard to cultivate my students' various paths to their destination.
Wow, thank you, Karen. Next up is an educator and an ed tech consultant, speaker, traveler, and founder of the new nonprofit Campo Creativo, Ed Campos Jr. Hey, Ed.
Hey, how's it going? Thank you for having me.
Can you tell our listeners where you are and what your current role is?
So I live in Central California in a town called Tulare, and I work based out of, it's kind of complicated, but I'm trying to sum this up. I work in Lemoore, California, which is in Kings County. I live in Tulare County, and I'm a part-time consultant there for Kings County Office of Ed. That's 50% of the time. And then the other 50% of the time, I like to call it my genius hour, or my 20% time, but it's turned into 50 because I do consulting. I get to do passion projects with friends. I get to start a nonprofit, like you mentioned. That's kind of it. But there's kind of a Russian nesting doll in there to unpack that. But
Wonderful. And then what we always ask all of our guests, when did math first become controversial to you?
so that's an interesting word, controversial. I think it became, I'm going to attack it from the lens of controversial within myself. Like there was inner conflict within myself around year 6 or 7, because I think similar to what Karen mentioned, I was rewarded with being good at the game of school. I was a great test taker, great rule follower. I could follow a recipe and bake something, but I couldn't tell you how the flavors mixed or what I was doing conceptually. And when I started to see what I now learned as math anxiety in the eyes of my students, that's where the inner conflict came at for me. And even though I could draw word problems really well on the board, still would see this real frustration in my students. And I didn't feel like I was doing any service to the kids. So it started me to reach out different ways of doing things, look beyond my math department and attending conferences, which I'm glad I got connected to.
Excellent. Glad to have you here. And last, but certainly not least, we have a contestant from Canada's Drag Race Season 1, a drag queen who loves math and sparkly things, and the host of the podcast, Think Queen, It's Kine. Hi, Kine.
Hi, Chris. Hi, Rob. Thanks so much for having me.
So glad to have you here. Can you tell our listeners where you are and what your current role is?
I am from a little town in Canada called Kitchener, Ontario, but really I'm a citizen of the world because you can find me online on social media. I make videos about math while dressed in drag. I got a Bachelor of Math from University of Waterloo, but since then I've gone on to just make videos about math, short 60-second videos talking about mathematicians throughout history, talking about fun math problems, and just presenting math in a way that sort of just frames that as a little bit more fun.
Excellent. Well, speaking of math, the question we want to ask you, like all of our guests, is when did math first become controversial to you?
I really relate to Karen and Ed in that I grew up being good at math because I was good at getting the right answers, and it just made total sense to me. And I have always thought of math as something that was like so neutral and like a great subject to be good in because my teachers and my parents would really say, "Oh, Kyle, you're so good at math. That's like so fierce and amazing." And then I only really realized maybe towards the end of high school, maybe around grade 12, that math was so much more than that. And, I guess I would start characterizing it as controversial once I realized that there wasn't always a right answer to things. And sometimes there could be multiple ways to get to the same answers. And sometimes mathematicians could disagree on things. So it was when I started writing math contests and I started really pursuing math in university that I saw that there was so much more to math than I thought there was.
Wonderful. Thank you. And with that, let's get into our debate. We begin with opening statements from each of our speakers. You each have 2 minutes to present your arguments about the most important thing to keep in mind about technology in math class.
And up first is Karen. Karen, you have 2 minutes and your time begins now.
So like I said earlier about expanding our view of math to include different ways to get multiple answers, I have more than one answer to this question. My top 3 things to keep in mind about using tech in math class are to support student learning, encourage exploration, and most importantly, to remember reflection. When we as teachers are deciding to use math ed tech, the technology we choose must support the mathematical concepts and enhance students' learning of those concepts. We shouldn't use the tech just because we have it. Instead, we need to be thoughtful about when and how to integrate technology and use it when it is a better tool for that lesson than the many other tools we have in math class. My second thing is to encourage exploration because the speed, accuracy, and visual power of technology opens up so many opportunities to investigate deeply and broadly instead of narrowly focusing on answer getting. Technology gives us entryways into wonderful wanderings that might not seem to be in the curriculum, but these excursions are closer to what professional mathematicians do than some of what we normally do in math class. Don't be afraid to take the scenic route. And my most important thing to keep in mind is to remember the process of reflection. If we help our students reflect on their observations and outcomes from a technology-based lesson and promote discussion and reasoning about the underlying mathematical concepts, their learning will be deeper and more durable. In my tech lessons, I leverage the power of the action-consequence-reflection cycle, whereby students perform mathematically meaningful actions with dynamic technology, observe the consequences, and reflect on the results in order to make sense of math ideas and build their understanding. Reflection is the critical component to make the math stick, and without planning for it, we risk that our students will remember using the tech, but neither recall nor master the math ideas we were trying to teach. As we continue our discussion tonight, I will elaborate on several strategies we can use to foster the reflection process and maximize our students' success.
Perfect. Thank you. And now we'll hear a different perspective from Ed Campos. Ed, you have 2 minutes and your time begins now.
So I want to use this time to tell the story of my extremes, because I've gone extreme in both ways. And I think I've found a perfect middle. I think right around the time I think I had this inner conflict that I mentioned, I started attending an EdTech organizations conference, and I went heavy into technology. I learned how to untether myself from the front of the classroom within my iPad and AirPlay using Apple TV, and that was a game changer for me. I could walk around and I could do something similar. So that was my first gateway into technology, and it just allowed me to be amongst my students and not sitting down, which I really enjoyed. And I will say I went pretty hardcore technology wise, while not having a lot of technology in the classroom. So, but I got to use a lot of technology also. And I think there were probably at one point in time, like my students just sitting around looking at me like, what, when do we get to use this? And so I had a lot of tech envy. But then I had a grant and I wrote 3-to-1 devices into my classroom, and then I could explore with iPads and Chromebooks. And so I went hardcore on all of them. But what I did realize, then at that time, I got introduced to the research paper of Peter Liljedahl with the Thinking Classroom. So before the book came out, a friend a long time ago, about 9-10 years ago, a friend introduced me to the research, and I had already started painting my classroom with whiteboard walls and with whiteboard paint. And so I had my thing up and moving, and the very lowest piece of technology I think you'll need is a Bluetooth speaker and a dope Spotify playlist. That's the must. You can do a whole lot with dry erase expo markers and with students to doing work and music. But I have learned that there's a balance, because students don't want to be up moving all the time either. Like, can we sit down finally? And it is like play CrossFit for your brain. I think you have to be real diverse with the activities with your students. And I actually learned about a framework called Math Technology for Equity by Jennifer King. And I'm a big believer in her framework, which I'll talk a little bit more about. And I think it's, if there's no intent to use the technology, we should not be using technology, because we can do almost everything else with dry erase, markers, whiteboard space, standing up, and some music.
Wow. Thanks, Ed. And now, finally, we will hear an opening statement from Kine. Kine, you have 2 minutes, and your time begins now.
Thank you. For me, the point of math class isn't to train you to become like a human calculator. I don't think people need to do everything in their head or even on their own with a paper and a pencil. And I think that technology can be a fantastic tool, as Karen was highlighting. However, I think that you should at least understand what the calculator is doing before you use it, right? There's a difference between having your phone camera solve an integration problem because it would save 10 minutes of tedious work that you could do if you wanted to, versus letting your phone do it because you just want to pass this class. You don't really know what's going on. I think that doing the math by hand is helpful when you're first understanding a concept. Of course, I don't think that students should have to do like 87,351 times 3,025,000 the long way with paper and pencil. But if you're learning about multiplication for the first time, I think you should have to do 8 times 3 by hand, and 80 times 30, or 80 times 3. I think it's important to be able to solve things by first principles, because that's how we can create a web of mathematics where everything is connected. And students are seeing that, matrix multiplication is actually just like regular multiplication, and regular multiplication is just repeated addition. So I'm pro technology. I'm pro working smarter, not harder, but I am against cheating, and I'm against technology getting in the way of students' actual thinking.
Perfect. Thank you all. We're diving right in, and I hear lots of commonality already about like using technology, but using it thoughtfully, let's say. I'm going to back us up for a second. I just want to start with like some of the more simple technology, just a calculator, not even a fancy calculator, just starting there. I know I worked with a school recently that not many people in their classes used it at like the high school level. And I'm just wondering your thoughts on how much do you think we should be using calculators and certainly in the later ages, and how to like balance that with the learning?
So one of the reasons to use calculators is that in the past, students who didn't master some of the arithmetic computation by hand were held out of higher level math classes or honors versions of whatever math class they were ready for. So having those kinds of technology calculators to do some of the arithmetic is an equity issue. That said, I don't want to use calculators simply to do the computation. What if you take a calculator and you see what happens when you keep increasing the denominator? What happens if you do 1/2, 1/10, 1/20, 1/100, 1/300, 1/1000? What happens? Where's that going? How can you investigate zeros when they're in the numerator and denominator of fractions? You can do it in the same way by doing repeated computations. The older students who have graphing calculators with some capabilities, what happens if you take a complex number and divide it in a fraction with its complex conjugate? Keep trying that, and there's wonderful explorations that can be had. So I do want to have the calculators as an equity issue to give all students entryway to upper level math, but I also want to use that power of computation to do some really fun explorations.
And Ed, or kind of you want to weigh in on calculator use and how to get people to embrace them?
Yeah, I'll just second everything that Karen just said. I love the idea of exploration, and I think similar like spreadsheets should be used more in math class to recognize those patterns and do the calculations for you quickly. I don't really see the pushback. I guess mainly from the camp of students don't know their math facts, but memorization is such a low form of understanding. I can memorize the Weekend song, I Can't Feel My Face, and not really understand what that song is about. You know what I mean? And it's not something we want kids to be singing.
I'll say this. I like calculators in classrooms. I think that, I feel like teachers used to say, oh, you won't always have access to a calculator, when now everybody has a calculator in their pockets with a phone. But, the funny thing is there are situations in adult life where, yeah, you have a calculator in your pocket, but do you know exactly how to use it? Like, say you're at a store and you want to buy something that's buy two, get one half off, and you also have to pay 13% sales tax, and you also have a coupon. Even if you do have a calculator that you're going to input all these numbers in, do you know what numbers to put in? And do you know how to apply a discount to the price? So I think, yes, calculators are important. I think everybody has access to a calculator, but that doesn't mean you'll have the solution to every problem. I think that we should integrate calculators into a classroom in a way where people know exactly how to solve problems using a calculator and how to use them most efficiently.
I think we could probably have multiple series of episodes about calculators and really dive into that deep. But I want to take it a little bit further now, because there are so many different tech programs out there, and how much tech is too much, and are there certain ways to use these different programs like within the class that could be beneficial to support student learning, like all of you have talked about? Like how much tech is too much, and are there any programs out there that you think are actually beneficial? And Ed, I'll actually start with you, and then we'll cycle through Kind and then Karen.
Yeah, I think I'm going to kind of piggyback on what I mentioned. I do think it's all about math practice number 6, I believe, using the appropriate tools strategically when we're using everything, whether it's whiteboard or Bluetooth or a calculator or pencil paper or our voice, and that's why I really think looking at Jennifer Su's math technology for equity is really brilliant, because I can just say Desmos, because Desmos is amazing and it does so many things for the math classroom because they listen to teachers. But like when I look at the dimensions that Jennifer has in her framework, access to inquiry-based learning, right? Supporting inquiry, discovery, and deep sense making. The fact that your voice, that your responses are anonymous is really changing the culture of what math class has been, and that pressure on speed and in getting the right answer. And it's more of a collective feeling at we than me, which is less stressful. Building identity through authorship and agency is another dimension. Amplification of the math processes, which I think, like, you think about the math practices, and then that collective thinking is per dimension 4. So I think as long as we're addressing some of those, I think that's what we should have in there. Mixed it up. It's attention spans. Our attention spans are so short. We have to really keep it, use some gamification, have some quizzes, let that grade some multiple choice stuff for you and check for understanding. Use some Desmos for some deeper dive exploration. Get up on the whiteboard and rock up playlists. So I think as long as there's an intention and there's a purpose for the why, then that's the good balance.
Time, when I come to you, I'm going to go a little bit more specific, because you actually mentioned about like your phone being able to help you solve a problem. And could you talk more about like, that type of technology? Because there are a lot of teachers that are like, heck no way. Like, we're not going to do that. But you talked about some benefits to that. Could you kind of weigh the pros and cons there?
Yeah, I feel like if it's a problem that you've done like hundreds of times that you know like the back of your hand and it's going to just save time, then I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I think if your teacher has specifically told you to solve this question, then I think, you're sort of cheating a little bit by taking that shortcut. I think that in light of new technology like this, I think teachers have to adapt because whether or not they allow it inside the classroom, students are going to find ways to find shortcuts outside of the classroom. So maybe that looks like showing your work and making sure that the student writes down every step of the problem instead of just writing down the final answer. But in general, I think that as Ed brought up, technology like Desmos, I think it's honestly, it's the future. And kids do need to get used to working with computers and technology because that's where their jobs are going to be in the future.
And Karen, when I come to you again, going slightly off of what you said in your beginning statement, how can we leverage some of these technologies to encourage exploration? I was fascinated as you were talking about that. I mean, obviously, at the time of this episode, everybody's going to hear the one that we previously recorded, where we talked a lot about Desmos. So, like outside of Desmos, encouraging exploration, what else can we use? And I was really fascinated with what you said about the calculator as well. Could you talk more about that?
So first of all, there are many great math ed tech platforms. So Desmos and GeoGebra and Texas Instruments calculators are among the really robust platforms that allows students to investigate math graphically, geometrically, numerically, statistically. So when I do workshops with teachers or conference presentations, I present on all three of those platforms. And, I try to meet teachers where they are with the technology that they have in their classroom. And some teachers use more than one platform. So I don't prioritize one over the other. They're all excellent and they all have really good strength to help students with technology-based lessons. In terms of what you asked about exploration, whatever platform you're on, there's so many investigations you can do. I mentioned a few before that we can do with fractions just on the home screen of a calculator or on GeoGebra in its CAS mode, which stands for Computer Algebra Systems. The other things you can do sliders to manipulate graphs. And again, all three platforms have sliders. So of course you want students when they're studying quadratics to know what the A parameter does to ax squared plus bx plus c. But most students don't play around with the B parameter. What happens if you slide the B parameter? All sorts of fun things happen and you can figure out what is going on with that. Another idea is you can work in a geometry environment. Again, Texas Instruments calculators, GeoGebra, and Desmos all have great geometry platforms. What happens if you connect midpoints of different size polygons? What do those segments have in common? What figures are created there? And there's so many more. You can take logs. Again, let's take log of 2, log of 20, log of 200, log of 2000. If you watch that, what's happening? And so we can do a lot of fun explorations that seem like they're not central to our curriculum, but you'll find that if you do these rich explorations, we cover a lot of ground.
Excellent. Karen, you have me trying to do calculations fast in my head to the things that you're throwing out as examples. I'm like, wait a minute. I love it. I want to ask a little bit about outside of school, like for homework and outside assignments students have. And then Kai, you started talking about this, so I'll start with you here. I'm wondering, like, is there a way to limit students using tech on their homework, or should we limit students using tech on homework, or is this just a dream that, like, what do teachers do if students have, photo math and now ChatGPT and everything else that just does it for them? Like, what's the point of homework?
I don't know. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that teachers really have to get creative because the technology is like evolving so fast. And I'm saying this as my little brother is somebody who uses ChatGPT when he's doing his homework. He's great at math, but like he uses it for help, like in his English class. And I just think that like it's so hard for a teacher to tell if something was assisted with AI, that, either you're going to have to bring lots of the homework into the classroom where you can actually keep your eyes on the students, or, just get a little bit creative with the questions. You have to maybe model the homework as if you're already expecting students to use all the tools at their hands. maybe the homework doesn't look like what's the answer to this problem, but maybe there's some sort of open-ended solution where the students can explore a little bit and give some of their own thoughts. And maybe the students are told to use a little bit of AI to help with their answers, whatever that looks like. I don't exactly know. All I know is that students are going to try to find the easy way out. But that's something that existed even before technology. There was always the ability to ask your parents to do your homework for you, even before we had calculators and AI. So it's something that teachers have to get a little bit creative about. But I also feel that, again, it's also an equity problem where even without technology, students could always ask their parents to help them with their homework, but not every student has a parent that could do that. So I think if we lessen a little bit of the burden on homework and bring more of that work inside the classroom, then maybe there's a little bit more control that the teachers have over what the students are doing and ensuring that it's actually their original work.
And Karen, Ed, do you want to weigh in on that? Like, is there a point of homework anymore at this point?
Well, I think I agree with what Kind said. There's an equity issue with homework. Many students don't have time, place, or resources to do homework as effectively as others. I think the bigger thing is to change the nature of the homework or the work that we're doing in class altogether. So whether you do less homework or more homework, I think it's changing the nature of the kinds of questions that you are asking. So certainly you can ask students to build some skills. Like Ed was saying, Peter's work on building thinking classrooms absolutely wants students to be able to demonstrate your understanding and check your understanding by practicing some skills. So you rebrand homework as things that are low stakes, try to include questions that ask students to explain their mathematical thought process. Instead of saying, show your work, I now say, show me your mathematical thinking. Some of the students I work with one-on-one, I tell them to narrate their work or annotate their work to tell me what they were thinking. And if you make the focus more about that thinking process rather than the final answer, there's less to cheat about. There's less to get homework answers with. So I think you change the nature both of homework and of the kinds of questions that you value in the math classroom.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I'm not sure if I was back in the classroom, I would be assigning any homework at all, just given that I think you need to be human beings and be with your family with all the other constraints, especially as a high school teacher. The amount of homework given in high school is just ridiculous. But I do think it has to change or not exist at all. I mean, it could be looking for math around their home, around their community, and exploring some of the concepts. If we did need to, spiral back and build some skills, I'm a big fan of Edpuzzle. Edpuzzle is one of the best tools for blended learning with the quick video, but make it entertaining and get a quick check-in for understanding. I've had students actually with attention deficit disorder say, wow, you actually know what you're talking about. I learned a lot because I put my headphones on and I could actually listen, make some more of those videos, so I think that's a huge differentiation piece and just having those available. But I honestly think, I focus back on the math practices, like how those are life skills to me. And my students need to be able to be successful for life and solve problems in life that are not just math related. I think in flexing that math muscle, I try and convince my students that they need to be mathematicians because you can problem solve for life. You can survive and feed your family more creatively. You can, get a better job, convince your employer that you need a raise by using reasoning and constructing viable arguments and these type of things. So making sure that kids have that carrot, like, why should I even care about this in the first place? And using technology to do that. Because to teach like ChatGPT does not exist. It's not a world that I want to lie to kids about. And it's just going to create more suffering for educators, to be honest.
So putting our teacher hat, keeping our teacher hat on and thinking about, okay, so let's say we do cut back on homework or we get rid of it altogether and we're trying to bring it into the classroom. We're in this phase of the video game culture, the quick, like they want a quick satisfaction. They want something that's going to happen in 15-second intervals. And then like, they want to move on to the next thing. So let's say we're either using the computers or the Chromebooks or even on their phones to be able to, help solve problems like, hey, we want you to use this technology. Like, how do we keep students from, oh, a butterfly, I'm going to text. Oh, a butterfly, I'm going to go to social media and I'm going to watch a kind video on TikTok. How do we keep people, although we don't want to keep people from that, but how do we want to keep our students, while they're in the classroom from checking social media and just scrolling, through Facebook or Twitter? Like how can we limit that in the class?
So I've been out of the classroom for a little bit, so I didn't have some of that to worry about. I think that where I care more about the attention span of students is to try to give them something to do with the math technology and for them to do the math, not simply view the math. And so, like I said in my opening statement, one of the things that's really important to me is to use the reflection part of the process of the action consequence reflection cycle. And that helps with the fact that students are by nature, they have short attention spans. There's so much else competing for their attention. And so what happened to me often early in my career when I was using technology was that we would do this fabulous technology lesson. And later the students were like, yeah, I remember you used the smartboard, or I remember we went to the computer lab to do the geometry software, because this was before everybody was holding laptops. And they could not remember what math I was trying to teach. They couldn't master it, and they had completely forgotten because so much else had interfered with their memory and making that learning deeper and more durable. So the reflection strategies that I like to use handle that short attention span. So what kind of reflection strategies am I talking about? One thing we do is we have students actively record their observations on a lab sheet or in their notebook or on a Google Doc. And they also discuss with their classmates what they're involved with. One of the tips I've learned from lots of people is put 2 students on one device, whether it's a calculator or a Desmos. That's going to foster conversation. The second part of reflection strategies is to make sure that whatever you're doing, you're not just saying, write down whether the triangles are congruent, but you're asking targeted questions that have them making predictions, testing out strategies. What will happen if I do this? What must I change to make something happen? When will something be true, and why do you think it happens? So you're asking the kinds of questions that engage the students in the math that the technology is doing for them. And the last reflection strategy that's really critical is after the lesson, summarize the learning together. Hopefully that summary is student directed, but it might be teacher directed depending on your situation. And this way, we're going to solidify the significant mathematical ideas, correct any misconceptions. We're going to connect to past knowledge and make that learning really deeper and more durable. We're also going to uncover possible fruitful other paths for exploration that somebody looked at with their partner or in their group that we didn't really think was part of the main lesson, but we might put that in a parking lot to go and explore later. But that summary piece, so many times I see fantastic technology lessons that well-meaning teachers and myself did. And if we didn't summarize what we were trying to learn, the kids had no recollection of it a week later. And it's happened to me, and I don't want it to happen to you.
And kind to you about that, same question. How would we keep kids like your brother staying off of ChatGPT when we don't really want them to do that right then, or any other advice you may have?
I think, teachers have a hard job keeping kids' attention, given that there's so much out there that they could just be distracted about. I think Ed had some great ideas about bringing gamification into the classroom, music, even using the technology to the benefit of adding the little sounds and all the bright colors to catch students' attentions. It's a hard bargain to get them to pay attention to some equations on a blackboard. So maybe if that means using technology to that benefit to add those the elements of the flashy colors to sort of attach their attention. I also like the idea that Karen had of putting them in groups. I think is a good idea, but I don't know. I'm not a teacher. I feel teachers have a lot of responsibility, but I have so much respect for them.
And Ed, to you.
Yeah. I want to second what Karen said, I think, about the multiple kids using one device. That's a big one for me. 2 to 1, 1 to 1 is super overrated, because I remember when I finally got all the technology and I was 1 to 1, I'm like, man, this is way too quiet. This sucks. I want to hear you thinking. And so my actual goal, I tell students, I hope you learn math, but I actually hope that you become a good public speaker, that you learn to communicate confidently. That's what I want in my heart for every student and adult, more than math. If the math seeps in, fine, but I want you to be like free to communicate your mathematical ideas. And that's been hard because of the trauma that the system of math education has done. That's why I think these tools can really undo that with the anonymity that we can put your responses to, giving that 2-to-1 student that, you put a team together, and then that collectivism comes in. Peter's research with Thinking Classroom, I mean, he did the research on it with the attention span by documenting how many times kids reach for their phone. So that tells you, if you create that environment, I am a big believer in your space. You have to really design your space to bring good energy to kids and adults. If I walked into a lot of math classes and that energy sucks, I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to be on my phone right away. Most classrooms don't have good energy. And I take pride that my students would ask, what kind of class gets taught in here? And I said, I don't know. What do you think? And they said, it's music or art. I go, it's similar. It's math. Because my space was very creative. I had turntables in there. Kids wanted to learn. It was fun. There was music. They were human beings. They could draw. I encouraged them to draw. I think that just making it fun. Math can be fun. I feel like we have to counteract the math trauma with like a lot of play-based therapy almost. And these technology tools allow us to play with math and allow us to really change what math has been in a safe space.
Yeah, I love everything that you said, Ed, because at my university, in my math program, it was like a requirement for us to take credits in communication. So that's how I ended up taking like a class about science fiction. But like, I feel there is such a stereotype that somebody who's good at math is somebody who's very stoic. They're very independent. They are doing all the equations in their head. And we aren't putting enough emphasis on the public speaking. And now doing what I do as a drag queen, I'm always standing on stages. And I think like, I wish I did more of this in high school. I wish I took a drama class, because it was so underrated how much that actually ended up impacting my career. I'm not a great public speaker. I don't think I'm a great public speaker. I want to be better at it. And I wish that, my teachers told me how important that was when I was younger. Instead, everyone told me, oh, be good at math and be really good at numbers. But nobody really emphasized the importance of good communication. So that's something that I also tell my little brother. I mean, it goes in one ear and out the other for him. But it's something that I try to tell everybody, that being good at math, yeah, it's good, but also being a good person and being confident and being able to talk to a room of people is so important, so underrated.
So picking up on what Kind just said, one of my favorite explorations we did was when I ditched the entire quadrilaterals chapter in geometry, and we went and used the geometry software that we had. And we did some things together, but then each group picked a different quadrilateral and they had to investigate everything that they could about it. And they had guidance on the kinds of questions they should be asking. But then each group presented to the class. So I taught nothing in that unit. The students taught each other all the different quadrilaterals. What does a rhombus do? What's a parallelogram? What about a kite? All of these things. And one of the other things I wanted to pick up on is the idea of what to do when students are done. Right? So Ed is talking about having some creative opportunities. If you include in your technology exploration, if you include some questions for fast finishers or anybody who just wants to extend what they're doing, they have something else to do besides turning to Twitter or see who's on TikTok. Because I've given them something else. So if you finish the set of lab questions, here's one more thing to test out, one more exploration, one more road to go down.
I have just one more question here. I'll wrap things up. We've danced around the topic of equity a little bit. It's come up a few times here. I want to talk about like advice to teachers. Many teachers incorporate tech in various ways, small and large. But how do they make sure that there's equitable access for students and that it's an equitable classroom, that all students still feel like they're invited and participating in stuff? And I'm wondering your thoughts, and I'll start with you, Ed, because I think you're one of the first ones that brought it up.
I hope this connects, but I feel like keeping it simple for teachers, I just want to ask them what their learning objective is, but not the traditional learning objective of what we have been required to put on the board to show our admin. I think that we need to have learning objectives about what we want to learn from our students. And that's the goal. That's what technology allows us to do. And that's an equity issue, because if it's all about what the objective for me to push information to you, then I'm not in a human-centered classroom. I'm not valuing the souls that are in front of me. And for me, when I use technology like this, the anonymity of that, I get to peek into their thinking in this really safe space. And when I desire to learn from my students, and that you can choose Desmo, or you can choose GeoGebra, or any of those things, as long as we can learn a little more from our students every day, that can help guide us. That can be our North Star. And I think that if we stick to that, that's an easy rule. What is our learning objective?
Brian or Karen have thoughts?
I think that I guess there are going to be some students who don't have access to the internet, and there are going to be some students who maybe don't have a computer at home that they can work with and go on websites like that. I feel that at the bare minimum, maybe schools should be providing some computers for students to work with in classrooms. But at the end of the day, it is also the reality that technology is everywhere. And even just with a phone, you can get on, even Snapchat has an AI now. It is becoming more accessible, and it is the future. I really feel that a lot of these students, they're going to grow up and they're going to use computers all day long, probably. And if they become mathematicians, if they become programmers, they're going to need to know how to use tech in their jobs. So I think there's a way that teachers can integrate tech into their lessons to help students prepare for the future, while also ensuring that it's accessible to everyone.
Well, so many of the tech platforms are free and accessible, and some of the different apps that you can use are very easy to use on your phone or on a tablet. So like if I have a GeoGebra little geometry figure, I can, text it to a student and they can manipulate it right on their phone. But the other thing goes to our previous conversation about homework, and that is to prioritize the use of technology in the classroom and make those learning experiences where you have the technology available. And even in a place, let's say, where you don't have devices in everybody's hands, or you don't have laptops in everybody's hands, you can, with targeted strategic use of reflection questions, you can work on one computer that's displayed to the class. So there's lots of ways to make do with low budget tech, and that helps make it equitable for everyone.
Excellent. And I think that concludes our questioning round. We will now end by giving each of you 2 minutes to share your final arguments.
And up first, we're going to begin with Karen. Karen, the floor is yours.
I really want teachers to feel confident using technology to enhance their students' learning success. Use it when you feel it's the best tool for the job, and make sure you've played around with it yourself and that it's doing what you want it to do. It's supporting students' learning. Engage in joyful explorations off the beaten path, and don't be afraid to take that scenic route. And remember that reflection is the key to your students' deep and durable learning. As you're exploring and planning your technology lessons, find some like-minded teachers, either in your school or out in your larger network. Find us on the internet. Plan together, discuss ideas, ask questions, and we'll be there. We're out on Twitter, we're out on Mastodon, and you can find us out there to help work through some of those issues. And I think that if you remember reflection, your technology lessons, which you've already spent a lot of time and energy doing a really good job setting them up, they're going to pay off. And include some of those strategies, and you'll find that your students remember what you taught them, remember what they were supposed to remember, and they're building a much more robust mathematical framework. So I just want you to get going with your math technology and use it for everybody's success.
Thank you. And next up with the final word, we have Ed Campos.
So I want to use my last 2 minutes to kind of talk about AI in particular, because I think this is really AI, and using it as a tool appropriately, strategically, if we take that math practice, is a way to achieve we can use it to achieve our dreams as an educator. I think technology has been weaponized against teachers, and using data and the strict testing sick obsession that has been used to traumatize math teachers. So we need to counteract with that. to utilize artificial intelligence. For me, it's a key to build more connection and get more creative, and to teach the math class the way that you want to teach, and to emphasize questioning, which I love. I love that AI has really brought back the questioning importance. Einstein says, if I had an hour to solve a problem and my life depended on the solution, I would spend the first 55 minutes determining the proper question to ask and the last 5 minutes solving the problem. And so I really think that focus on questioning. I recently did some work with some themes from a local reservation, and I used AI to help me come up with a thematic unit because I have a love for stickers. Using linear algebra, having students create stickers that included their identity, and doing linear algebra, all the linear algebra thematic unit revolving stickers. And AI helped me create that really easily. And the student created native image stickers, which I don't have right now. Learning algebra, learning slope price per sticker, analyzing different sticker companies online. It's really the possibilities are endless. Use ChatGPT, use all of this AI. Have no shame in doing it because it'll make our jobs easier and fight back on the way that technology has been using against math education.
Thank you, Ed. And the final word, we have Kine. Kine, take it away.
My final word, I want to say that tech in classrooms, it can definitely be convenient. It can help with grabbing students' attention, as we've said, and it can even enhance the learning experience in many ways. With that being said, I think that tech shouldn't get in the way of thinking. I think that students should still have to learn basic numeracy skills and critical thinking. And that will always be, more important than letting a calculator get your answers for you. But with that being said, I also think that tech is the future. Whether you like it or not as a teacher, whether you decide to use it in your classrooms. I remember being a little kid in classrooms, and my teacher, they were teaching me about the Pythagorean theorem. Meanwhile, they didn't know how to expand the window of the screen to fill up the whole board, and they had to get one of us to come up to the computer and help them. Right? This is the new generation of people that are going to grow up and be our leaders. And things like coding, social media, email, AI, they're going to be more and more relevant in the coming future, even more so than, memorizing the Pythagorean theorem. So we need to integrate tech into our classrooms, knowing that we live in a world with ChatGPT, knowing that we live in a world where students are going to need to know how to code computer programs and how to work with, financial math. School is about preparing students for adulthood and real life. So that's what we need to keep in mind when we're using tech in math class.
Thank you all. And that concludes this really robust discussion. Wow, you've given us such great insights, good advice, and I hope this gives teachers out there some good food for thought.
Now it's up to our listeners to take a moment, ponder the arguments, share with friends and colleagues on what resonated with you. I encourage you to reach out to somebody that may be against tech and talk about tech, or somebody who's way too into tech to talk about maybe the other extreme, and bring them back down to the middle and think about student learning and understanding. Be sure to go to our Twitter at DebateMathPod to share your thoughts on this debate.
Again, huge thanks to all three of our guests. You were thoughtful, respectful, had great ideas, and you just really played off each other. You're all really passionate about students learning and learning math in a wholesome way.
And as always, thanks to all those who are listening. We hope you enjoyed and learned from this discussion debate.
And as we wrap up, Karen, where can listeners find you?
They can find me. I'm on Twitter and Mastodon. I'm at Karen Camp, and that's Mastodon. And my website where I write a Reflections and Tangents blog is karendcamp.wordpress.com, and camp has that E on the end. karendcamp at .wordpress.com.
And we'll put all this in the show notes, don't worry.
And Ed, where can listeners find you?
So I have a website that I'm starting to revive again, edcomposjr.com. I'm Ed Campos Jr. on all the socials, Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky. I think that's what that's called right now. And then my new nonprofit is campocreativo.org. To plug that one, where I'm giving creativity grants to teachers and students. And just gave $1,000 creativity grant to my first student yesterday, and I'm awarding $1,000 creativity grant to the teacher to start an art club this weekend.
Oh, that's so exciting. And Kine, where can listeners find you?
You can find me at Online Kine. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube. I make short little bite-sized math videos, even videos about science and culture. Right now, since it's June when we're filming this, I'm doing videos all about pride and the history of pride. And that's Online Kine.
Wonderful. Thank you all. Want to learn more about incorporating debate activities into your math classroom? Go to luzniak.com/podcast to sign up for my mailing list and get your first set of example debate activities you could use with your students today. Go to luzniak.com/podcast.
Don't forget to reach out to us with comments and questions on debatemath.com, or follow us on Twitter at debatemathpod, and follow along with #debatemathpod.
Rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts,
or wherever you listen to this podcast. Your feedback is super important to us.
Well, that's all from us.
Looking forward to debating with you more next episode. Until next time, cheers.